Rain slicked the marble steps of the memorial, turning the engraved names of the victims into dark streaks under the flickering streetlights. Maya Jefferson stood at the edge, clipboard clutched in her gloved hands, her eyes tracing the lines she had designed herself. A tribute to lives erased, a quiet act of defiance against a system that had long ignored them. "Move along, lady," barked Officer Blake, his boots splashing through the puddles. His voice was flat, cold, carrying the weight of authority like a weapon. Maya froze, the metal stanchion behind her suddenly feeling like a cage. She had passed every security check, obtained every permit. Yet here he was, towering over her, suspicion radiating from every twitch of his jaw. I'm with the memorial," she said, voice tight but steady. "I designed it." Blake snorted, a sound that dripped with contempt. "Right. You, the designer. Let's see some ID." His hand hovered near his holster. The crowd of mourners shifted uneasily. Cameras flashed from journalists who had been documenting the vigil. Whispers rose like wind through the trees. Maya's stomach knotted. She had faced prejudice before, but never so pointed, so public, so humiliating. "You don't belong here," Blake spat. Maya swallowed, hands trembling. She wanted to speak, to assert herself, but before she could, he reached for her clipboard. A single thought froze her blood. This man could ruin everything she had built and nobody might stop him. A siren wailed in the distance, mingling with the drizzle, as Blake's shadow fell over her work. Rain splattered against the polished stone steps of the memorial, each droplet dragging faint streaks across engraved names. Maya Jefferson stood at the perimeter, umbrella clutched under one arm, clipboard in the other. Her eyes traced the precise lines she had designed, the curves and angles meant to honor lives cut short, to create a space that felt sacred, solemn, but alive. She took a deep breath, the air damp and metallic, and tightened her grip on the papers. Every detail mattered. Every moment mattered. "Move along, lady." The voice was abrupt, a harsh cut through the gentle murmur of mourners. Maya froze. Officer Blake stood a few feet away, coat slick with rain, boots pressing water into the stone like he owned it. His glare was sharp, measuring, dismissive. I'm with the memorial," she said, voice firm though her chest tightened. "I designed it." Blake's eyes narrowed. "Designer, huh?" He tilted his head, hands on his belt. "Let's see some ID. Make it quick." A hush fell over the small crowd. Camera flashes from journalists at the vigil reflected in the wet stone. Maya's fingers tightened around the clipboard. She had every permit, every authorization. Yet this man, in a uniform meant to serve and protect, had the power to nullify all of that with a single motion. "I already showed my ID at the entrance. This is my work." Her voice didn't waver, though her stomach twisted into knots. Blake leaned closer, and the air between them felt like a cage. "You don't belong here," he said, low, deliberate. His hand hovered near his holster, not threatening yet, but it was enough. The crowd shuffled. Some whispered. Some raised phones, unsure whether to intervene or remain invisible. Maya's heart thudded. She had faced prejudice before, offhand comments, subtle glances, but never so pointed, so public, so humiliating. "I said move along," Blake repeated. His tone had sharpened. "Now." Maya's fingers brushed the edge of a name engraved in black stone. A teenager, killed during a traffic stop, forgotten by everyone except the memorial. Her chest ached at the injustice. She swallowed and lifted her chin. "This is for them," she said quietly, almost to herself, almost a prayer. Blake smirked. "For them? Or for attention? I've seen your type, always looking for a spotlight, always pushing the narrative." A nearby journalist pen paused mid-note. Maya felt the sting of humiliation spread across her cheeks, though she stood rigid. "I'm not here for attention," she said. "I'm here for the families, for the victims, for justice and memory." Blake's eyes flicked toward the reporters, the witnesses, the families gathered. A flicker of irritation passed over his face. "Justice? You're just another activist with clipboard," he sneered. Maya's jaw tightened. Her mind raced. She needed to de-escalate, protect the memorial, protect herself, protect the message. She opened her mouth to speak again, but before she could, Blake reached for her clipboard. Her hand shot out instinctively. "Don't touch that." He smirked, brushing past her defense. The clipboard shifted in his grasp, threatening to spill the papers into the wet ground. Maya lunged, a sharp exhale catching in her throat, but a bystander, one of the families, stepped forward. "Officer, that's hers. Let it be." Blake glanced at the interloper, irritation flickering across his face. He shoved the clipboard toward Maya. "Fine, but move along. Now." Maya's chest heaved. The air smelled of rain and wet asphalt, heavy with tension. Her fingers clutched the clipboard as if it were a lifeline. She swallowed, refusing to let tears blur her vision. She glanced at the engraved names, the faces etched into her mind, each one a reminder of why she endured, why she persisted, why she couldn't back down. "Move along," she echoed, voice barely above a whisper but strong. Her eyes met Blake's, unwavering. "This is their place, their memory, and I'm not moving." The officer's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, silence fell over the steps. Only the drizzle and distant traffic filled the void. Maya's pulse thrummed in her ears. "Lady, you're testing me," Blake said finally, voice low, dangerous. "You want a problem, you'll get one." Maya felt the weight of the moment pressed down, not just his words, but the authority they carried. One wrong move, and her permits, her work, her credibility, all of it, could vanish under the sweep of a single badge. She swallowed the fear, anchored herself to the names before her. "Then know this," she said, voice steady. "I will not let you erase them. Not now, not ever." Blake paused, the hint of surprise flickering across his features. He hadn't expected resistance so calm, so deliberate. His gaze swept the gathering crowd, the cameras, the solemn faces, and a flicker of uncertainty crossed him. But before anything else could unfold, his radio crackled, sharp, urgent. Blake's head jerked toward it, distracted. Maya's heart didn't relax. She knew the reprieve was temporary. As he stepped back, muttering into the radio, Maya looked down at her clipboard. Paper soaked slightly in the rain, but her work remained intact. Her pulse slowed, but the tension didn't lift. A single thought clawed at her mind. He could come back. He could still destroy everything. A siren wailed in the distance, mingling with the drizzle, and the shadows of the memorial stretched long across the wet stone. Maya inhaled, anchoring herself to the names engraved before her, to the families who relied on her, to the memories she had vowed to protect. And then she noticed something, a camera pointed directly at her, its red recording light blinking. Her pulse caught. Somewhere, someone was already watching. Somewhere, someone could make her stand here in the rain and turn her dedication into spectacle. Her fingers tightened around the wet clipboard. She lifted her gaze, unwavering, toward the officer and the looming crowd. The sound of rain tapping against the office window was a soft percussion to Maya's thoughts as she sank into her chair. Her coat, still damp from the memorial, dripped onto the tile floor. She had replayed the confrontation with Officer Blake a dozen times in her mind. Each replay carried a twist of fear, anger, and disbelief. Why did it always feel like her work, her purpose, was under attack because of the color of her skin? Her phone buzzed, a notification from a reporter she had met at the vigil. The clip of Blake's confrontation had gone viral. Comments ranged from outrage to skepticism, some praising her courage, others questioning her presence. Maya scrolled through the words with a tightening in her chest. Every judgment, every assumption, felt like a reminder of the world she had been navigating her entire life. She closed her eyes, and memories came unbidden. Her neighborhood in Chicago had never been easy. Sirens punctuated the night more often than laughter, and the local police precinct was a presence felt in shadows and doorways. As a child, she remembered her father's warnings. "Don't make sudden moves, Maya. Don't give them a reason." She had learned early that her very existence could be scrutinized, questioned, and punished. The smallest misstep could ripple outward, turning ordinary moments into crises. It was those echoes that had driven her to urban design, to create spaces where lives mattered, where communities would remember, heal, and honor without fear. Every memorial she designed carried fragments of her own experience. Grief turned into geometry, injustice into symmetry. The memorial tonight was no exception. Meanwhile, Blake's own story threaded a darker, less visible pattern. Maya didn't know him personally, but through reports and whispers, she understood the framework he operated within. Growing up in a suburb far from her city struggles, Blake had risen through law enforcement with accolades for discipline and assertiveness. His biases were cultivated quietly. Jokes told in the locker room, commendations for handling troublesome neighborhoods, and promotions that rewarded toughness over empathy. That morning, when he confronted her, it wasn't just a personal slight. It was a microcosm of a system designed to uphold authority and marginalize dissent. Every sneer, every dismissive motion, every casual assumption of guilt carried decades of institutional reinforcement. Maya tapped her fingers against the table, grounding herself. Her team at the design firm had called, checking on her. Her colleagues admired her work, but didn't fully grasp the emotional toll confronting such open hostility. "You handled it well," said one voice over the phone. "He'll think twice before pulling something like that again." But Maya knew better. Authority rarely self-corrected. Change, when it came, was painstaking and painful. She remembered the night she had first walked past the precinct with her father, listening as he pointed out cases of misconduct, beatings, wrongful stops. She had been 12, naive yet indelibly marked by the knowledge that justice was unevenly distributed. Her reflection was interrupted by another buzz, an email from the city archives. A file had been released under a public request, detailing Blake's past complaints. Several anonymous accounts of harassment, multiple civilian reports ignored or dismissed, and commendations for handling tense situations. The pattern was undeniable. Maya leaned back, closing her eyes against the glow of the computer screen. Every instinct in her body told her to confront this head-on, to prepare documentation, to strategize. She knew this wasn't only about her or the memorial. It was about the families whose names she had etched into stone, whose memories Blake had tried to diminish. A knock at her door drew her attention. Her assistant, Janelle, stepped in, shaking off an umbrella. "Maya." People were already reaching out about the video. They're asking for interviews. Her eyes flicked to the screen. Some media outlets want a statement now. Maya nodded slowly, folding her hands. "We'll handle it carefully. I don't want this to become about me. It's about them." She gestured toward the memorial plan spread across her desk. Each sketch a story, a life preserved. Janelle bit her lip. Do you think Blake will try something again?" Maya exhaled. "If he does, we'll be ready. But it's not just about confrontation. It's about exposing the pattern, the system that allows him to act unchecked. That's what people need to see." Her thoughts drifted again, unbidden, to the memorial itself. Families had approached her over the years, sharing fragments of grief and resilience. She remembered the mother who traced her fingers over a name, tears mingling with rain, whispering, "Thank you for remembering him." That memory gave her strength, a quiet power to stand even when Blake's shadow loomed large. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from her brother. "Saw the video. Stay safe. Don't let him get to you." She typed back, "I won't. I'm not just standing for me." Maya pushed away from the desk and walked to the window. Outside, the rain had slowed, leaving puddles that reflected the city lights like fractured stars. The memory of Blake's words, "You don't belong here," still rang in her ears. But she squared her shoulders. Belonging wasn't granted by a badge. It was claimed through courage, persistence, and truth. Every drop of rain on the memorial steps had told a story tonight. Every whisper from the families, every glare from Blake, every camera click. Each was a note in a symphony of injustice and defiance. Maya understood now more than ever that her path forward required both precision and patience, a balance of resilience and strategy. She returned to her desk, opening the file of Blake's complaints and past actions. Names, dates, incidents, patterns. This was the evidence she needed. This was the way to confront authority, not with fists or anger, but with facts, persistence, and moral clarity. And somewhere in the shadows, she felt it, the weight of responsibility, not just to herself, not just to the memorial, But to every life erased, every voice silenced, every injustice ignored. Tonight was only the beginning. By morning, the video of Officer Blake confronting Maya Jefferson at the memorial had exploded across social media. Notifications pinged relentlessly on her phone, tweets, shares, comments, and direct messages. Some were supportive, praising her courage. Others were cruel, questioning her presence, her motives, even her professionalism. Maya sat at her kitchen table, coffee cooling in a ceramic mug, scrolling through the growing storm with a mix of exhaustion and resolve. Janelle, her assistant, leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "People are really paying attention," she said, her voice tight. "Local news, national blogs, they're calling." Maya nodded. "I expected attention, but not this quickly." She rubbed her temples, the weight of the memorial, the confrontation, and now public scrutiny pressing down on her. Every headline felt like a judgment. Every comment felt like a reminder that systemic bias didn't vanish when the cameras rolled. The first call came from a local reporter, a young woman with empathy in her tone. "Maya, I know this is overwhelming, but can we talk about what happened last night?" Maya adjusted her seat. "Yes, but it's not just about what happened. It's about the pattern, about authority unchecked, about families who lost everything to a system that doesn't listen." The reporter typed furiously. "Can you describe your immediate reaction when Blake confronted you?" Maya's fingers tightened around the mug. "Shock, fear, and then determination. I realized that if I stepped back, even for a moment, it would feel like erasing the people this memorial honors. I couldn't allow that." The conversation lingered on her work, the memorial's design, and her motivation. But the reporter also asked the inevitable. Why now? Why make this public? Maya inhaled deeply. Because these stories matter. Because visibility is the first step toward accountability. Because silence allows injustice to thrive. Janelle glanced at the growing pile of emails, press releases, interview requests, and private messages from concerned citizens. Some called her brave, others patronizing, assuming she must have sought attention. Maya's jaw tightened. Every message was a reminder that public perception was as complex as the law itself. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "You're judged before you're heard. Remember that, always." She typed a response to the journalist. "This is not about me. This is about the families and the lives lost. That is the story." By mid-morning, the story had spread to television. Anchors dissected the clip, debating the actions of both the officer and Maya. Some framed her as a victim. Others questioned her professionalism. Each segment reminded her that narrative was as much about perception as reality. Maya met with her colleagues at the firm via video call. They strategized carefully how to handle media inquiries, how to protect the family's privacy, how to ensure the focus remained on the memorial's purpose. Dialogue flew rapidly, practical decisions mixed with emotional weight. "Do not let them reduce this to a fight between two people," Maya said firmly. "It's about the system. It's about the patterns of behavior we allow to continue unchecked. We have to keep it framed correctly." Janelle added, "And your safety. Blake's shown he doesn't respect boundaries. We need to anticipate his next move." Maya nodded, tension settling into her shoulders. She knew he could act again. The thought made her pulse quicken. But retreat was not an option, not when the stories of the families relied on her advocacy. Throughout the day, she returned calls from journalists, fielded emails from supporters, and responded to queries from the city council. She carefully moderated interviews, never letting anger dictate her words. The dialogue she carried in each conversation was meticulous, precise, measured, emotionally charged when necessary, but always centering the victims. During one interview, a television anchor asked, "Maya, do you feel the system failed you last night?" Her response was immediate, steady. "The system isn't designed to protect citizens equally. That's why spaces like this memorial exist. To ensure the lives erased by oversight, prejudice, or negligence are not forgotten." My confrontation with Officer Blake was a symptom of a broader pattern, not an isolated incident. A silence followed the statement, heavy and tense. Maya could almost feel it transmitted through the screen. into homes, into the minds of viewers. She held their attention, not with dramatics, but with truth. Later that evening, as the rain subsided and the city lights reflected off wet streets, Maya sat by her desk reviewing footage from multiple cameras. Her phone buzzed, notifications, emails, messages from family. Some worried she was exposing herself too much. Others urged her to take pride. Her brother's message blinked. "You're making a difference. Don't let the noise shake you." She typed back, "I can't let them erase these stories. That's bigger than fear." Maya thought of the memorial once more, of families gathering under drizzle, of names etched in stone, of the dignity she sought to preserve. Every broadcast, every article, every tweet was an extension of her commitment. She understood the stakes. The public narrative could either amplify the injustice or bury it under noise. Her reflection was interrupted by a knock at the door. Janelle opened it, holding a letter from the city council. They want to meet tomorrow. About the incident. About Blake. Maya took the envelope, the paper crisp between her fingers. Her chest tightened with anticipation and trepidation. This was the first formal acknowledgement of her ordeal by those in power. A tentative, bureaucratic response, but a step forward. She leaned back, gazing at the city skyline through the rain-streaked window. The storm of media. Maya Jefferson sat in the sterile hallway of the city's police oversight office, her hands clasped tightly over her wet clipboard. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. She had scheduled an appointment to file a formal complaint against Officer Blake, expecting professionalism, documentation, and acknowledgement. Instead, she encountered the labyrinthine inertia of bureaucracy. "Name?" asked the clerk, barely looking up from her screen. Her tone was neutral, almost bored. "Maya Jefferson. I'm filing a complaint regarding Officer Blake. Incident occurred at the memorial yesterday evening." Maya said clearly. The clerk typed slowly, her fingers tapping with a detached rhythm. "Do you have evidence?" "Photos, videos, witnesses." Maya placed the clipboard carefully on the counter. "Yes. Journalists documented the incident. Several witnesses can confirm the events." Right. We'll need you to fill out Form 37B. Twice. And then submit a notarized copy of your identification, along with signed acknowledgement of potential delays. Maya's eyes narrowed. "Delays?" The clerk looked up briefly, a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Investigations can take up to 6 months, sometimes longer. We have procedures to ensure fairness and thoroughness. You understand, yes?" Maya nodded, suppressing the surge of frustration. She had anticipated pushback, but the indifference, the passive protection of officers, cut deeper than Blake's confrontation ever could. Her mind flashed back to the memorial steps, to the officer's sneer, to the public humiliation she endured. Now, here was a different kind of barrier, the institutional walls built to maintain power under the guise of protocol. She spent the next hour filling out forms, signing documents, and answering questions designed to minimize her claims. Each page was a reminder that the system had been designed to protect authority figures, not civilians, and certainly not black women standing their ground. A supervisor, middle-aged with a meticulously pressed suit, appeared at the counter. "Ms. Jefferson?" His voice carried a veneer of civility, but Maya could sense the subtle undertone of skepticism. "I understand your complaint, but I must caution you. Filing against an officer can have consequences, and sometimes cases are dismissed due to insufficient evidence." Maya's hands tightened around the clipboard. "Insufficient evidence?" "We have video footage, multiple witness statements, and public documentation." "How can that be considered insufficient?" The supervisor leaned back slightly, steepling his fingers. "We operate under strict guidelines. This ensures fairness. Our officers are trained, and occasionally misunderstandings occur. We must approach every case impartially." The words felt like a slap, their meaning clear. Impartiality often favored authority. Maya's chest ached with the weight of both frustration and recognition. This was the system Blake thrived in, the invisible shield that had allowed him to act unchecked. Outside, the memorial still lingered in her mind, rain-soaked steps and engraved names vivid against the gray drizzle. She thought of the families, of their reliance on her advocacy, of the quiet defiance that had carried her to this point. She couldn't allow bureaucracy to render her efforts invisible. After a pause, she asked, voice deliberate and steady, "So what are my next steps? How can we ensure this complaint is heard?" The supervisor shuffled papers, his expression unreadable. "You can submit additional evidence, attend interviews, and cooperate with investigators. But patience is required. This process is lengthy." Maya nodded again, noting every procedural nuance. "Understood. I will cooperate fully. But make no mistake, this is not just about me. This is about accountability. Every officer who believes they are above scrutiny undermines public trust." The supervisor's lips pressed into a thin line, and he gave a curt nod. "We appreciate your understanding. Someone will contact you." Maya left the office, the corridor echoing her steps. Outside, the city felt unchanged, indifferent to her frustration, unaware of the moral weight she carried. A gust of wind rattled the memorial steps in her mind, and she shivered, pulling her coat tighter. Her phone buzzed. A text from a journalist she had interviewed the day before. "Update on Blake's history. Multiple prior complaints ignored. You're building a record." Maya exhaled, a mixture of relief and renewed determination flooding through her. She knew the walls would remain high, procedures slow and obstacles plentiful, but she also knew that persistence, documentation, and public scrutiny were tools she could wield against institutional complacency. She stopped at the edge of the office plaza, looking down the street where the memorial lay hidden from view, but not from memory. Families had placed flowers at the steps the night before. Candles had burned low. Voices had whispered names into the damp air. And somewhere, Blake had underestimated the ripple effect of his own arrogance. The city had created systems meant to slow her, protect him, and shield the status quo. But Maya understood the broader strategy. By remaining steadfast, collecting evidence, and amplifying the voices of those silenced, she could expose the system for what it truly. Maya Jefferson sat in her small apartment, rain streaking the windows as she spread files across the coffee table. Each folder held documentation, past complaints against Officer Blake, news clippings, witness statements, and public records obtained through careful requests. The pattern was unmistakable. Multiple allegations of harassment, intimidation, and misconduct had been filed over the years, many ignored or dismissed. Her phone buzzed incessantly, journalists requesting interviews, concerned citizens offering support, and legal advisors checking in. She ignored all but one, a call from her friend and investigative journalist, Lila Moreno. "Maya," Lila said immediately, urgency in her voice. "I've dug into Blake's history. There are dozens of reports, names, dates, incidents that line up exactly with what you experienced. He's got a pattern." Maya leaned back, exhaling. "I know. I can see it in these files. But what's frustrating is that the system keeps protecting him. How many times can one officer get away with intimidation before someone actually acts?" "Exactly," Lila said. "But the good news? We have a trail. Everything is documented. Multiple sources corroborating stories, even internal memos. This isn't just your word against his. We can show a clear pattern of abuse." Maya spread the documents across the table, arranging them chronologically. Every complaint told a similar story. Minor infractions blown out of proportion, civilians silenced, and Blake rewarded for handling situations firmly. The structural bias was clear, the institutional shielding unmistakable. "This is systemic," Maya said, her voice quiet but firm. "It's not just Blake. It's the system that allows him to act this way." "Then we attack the system," Lila said. "We expose the pattern publicly. We line up witnesses, collect statements, and show the city that inaction has consequences." Maya nodded. She knew that exposure was powerful, but it carried risks. Blake had authority, connections, and influence. But she also had documentation, the support of families, and public attention. The balance of power was subtle, precarious, but not insurmountable. The first step was to organize the files clearly. Maya labeled each complaint, summarizing incidents in concise bullet points. Date, location, victim statement, officer action, outcome. By evening, the table was covered in layers of paper, color-coded folders creating a visual map of misconduct. She paused to breathe, reflecting on the irony. Blake had tried to assert control over her by confronting her at the memorial, but his actions had inadvertently created evidence against him. Every overreach, every display of authority, strengthened her case. Her phone buzzed again, a message from the city archives confirming access to previously redacted reports. Maya's pulse quickened. This could be the key. The missing links and chain of complaints could finally connect the dots and reveal the structural negligence enabling Blake's behavior. Lila spoke again. We need a strategy. I'll draft a timeline of events, highlighting key incidents and ignore complaints. Then we bring it to the media, the city council, and any oversight committee willing to listen. Maya nodded. And we need the families involved. Their testimonies, even if brief, carry emotional weight that documentation alone cannot convey. They worked late into the night, alternating between research, calls, and strategy discussions. Maya could feel the weight of responsibility pressing against her, but it was a familiar, necessary weight of advocacy. She thought of the memorial steps, the families' faces, and the resilience they had shown. She could not falter now. A knock at the door startled her. It was Janelle, holding a stack of additional documents. These arrived from the city council. Looks like some of Blake's previous incidents are logged here, but not publicly acknowledged. Maya accepted the papers, quickly skimming. Each incident confirmed the pattern she had already pieced together. Complaints of harassment, intimidation, and public humiliation. Minor disciplinary actions that left him free to continue unchecked. The bureaucracy was protecting him as much as his badge. This is perfect, Maya said. Not perfect for him, but perfect for demonstrating the pattern. We can show that this isn't isolated. It's ongoing. Janelle hesitated. Are you sure you want to go public with all this? It's going to be intense. Blake won't like it, and the backlash could be personal. Maya looked at the files, then back at Janelle. I'm sure. It's not about revenge. It's about accountability. About families who've been silenced for years. About a system that rewards misconduct. If we don't expose it, who will? Outside, the city lights reflected off wet streets. Maya imagined Blake, somewhere in his office, unaware of the storm building around him. Each document she reviewed, each witness she contacted, and each article Lila prepared were creating a narrative he could not suppress. She returned to the table, arranging the documents once more. Names, dates, incidents, and outcomes created a mosaic of negligence and abuse of power. Every folder she touched felt like a step toward justice. Every piece of evidence a shield against intimidation. As the night deepened, Maya paused, closing her eyes. The weight of the work, the families, and the confrontation with Blake pressed against her. She could not forget the fear, the humiliation, the quiet whispers of the memorial steps. But she could transform that energy into action. Her phone buzzed again, a message from a parent who had attended the memorial. Thank you for fighting for us. We see you. We support you. Maya smiled faintly, the exhaustion fading slightly. These words were more powerful than any bureaucratic dismissal, any sneer from Blake, or any public scrutiny. She was not alone. By midnight, the files were organized, the evidence compiled, and a preliminary strategy in place. Maya knew the next steps would require courage, public presence, and careful navigation of legal and social channels. But for the first time, she felt the momentum shift. The system that had protected Blake for years was now vulnerable, not to rumor, not to speculation, but to documented truth. And somewhere in the shadows, Maya imagined Blake noticing the change, the subtle, inevitable shift in visibility and accountability. His authority could no longer operate unchecked. Maya leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. The uncovering of the pattern was just the beginning, but it was powerful. And as long as she persisted, as long as families, journalists, and allies stood with her, the pattern could not remain hidden. The night was quiet. The rain had stopped, but the storm of accountability was just beginning. The city council chambers smelled faintly of polished wood and anxiety. Maya Jefferson adjusted the sleeve of her coat as she entered, her files clutched tightly against her chest. Journalists lined the perimeter, cameras poised to capture every word, every gesture. Families of victims sat in the front rows, their eyes focused, their hands intertwined. This was more than testimony. It was a stage for accountability, a battlefield where truth would confront authority. Officer Blake sat across the room, his posture rigid, fingers tapping the edge of the desk. He gave the occasional glance to Maya, a flicker of irritation crossing his features, masked by professional composure. The council members murmured among themselves, their attention divided between the papers on their desks and the audience in the gallery. Maya stepped forward when called, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Silence fell, a tense anticipation pressing against her chest. She took a deep breath and began. "My name is Maya Jefferson," she said, voice steady, cutting through the stillness. "I am here to present evidence of repeated misconduct by Officer Blake, documented over several years. This is not a single incident. It is a pattern, and it affects every member of this community who has been subjected to intimidation, harassment, or negligence by those sworn to protect them." She distributed copies of her files to the council members and the clerk. These documents include complaints filed by civilians, witnesses' statements, internal reports, and public records. Each illustrates a recurring disregard for accountability and a misuse of authority. This system has allowed misconduct to persist, and today I ask for oversight and justice, not only for myself, but for all those whose voices have been ignored. Blake's expression hardened. "This is an exaggeration. A few minor complaints do not indicate a pattern," he said, his voice measured, attempting to maintain control. "I have performed my duties according to procedure. This accusation is politically motivated." Maya's jaw tightened. She had anticipated this defense. Authority always seeks to deflect responsibility, to protect itself under the guise of procedure. She remained calm. "The complaints are not isolated, sir," she replied firmly. "They are consistent and documented over time. Multiple sources corroborate the events. This is a systemic issue, and it is being addressed publicly today because repeated attempts at private resolution have failed." A council member raised a hand. "Ms. Jefferson, can you summarize the key incidents?" Maya nodded. "Certainly. Incident 1, a civilian harassment complaint ignored in 2018. Incident 2, intimidation during a public vigil in 2020, documented by multiple journalists. Incident 3, repeated use of authority to silence witnesses and discredit complaints, observed internally and publicly." She paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "These are only a fraction of the records compiled." Blake's lips pressed into a thin line. He leaned back, eyes scanning the room, seeking allies among the council members, but finding none. The room's attention was on Maya, on the families, on the documented truth she presented. A mother in the front row spoke softly. "My son's name is Michael Carter. He was killed during a routine traffic stop." Officer Blake responded to the scene. His attitude, his questions, his dismissive tone, it silenced witnesses and dismissed our grief. This memorial exists because of Maya's dedication. And today we finally have a voice. Maya felt a swell of emotion, but held it in check. Her role was facilitator, advocate, and witness. She gestured toward the mother, affirming the courage it took to speak publicly. Blake shifted in his seat. His authority was being tested not by confrontation, but by evidence, testimony, and moral scrutiny. His voice, once confident and commanding, now faltered slightly. "These accusations are hearsay. Individual perspectives. I follow procedure. The department reviewed these claims." "Reviewed and dismissed," Maya said, her voice calm but sharp, slicing through the room's tension. "Repeatedly. That is the point. The system allowed misconduct to continue unchecked, and today we demand accountability." Another council member leaned forward. "Do you have a proposed resolution, Ms. Jefferson?" "Yes," she said. "First, a thorough, independent investigation into Officer Blake's conduct. Second, implementation of transparent oversight mechanisms to prevent further misconduct. Third, recognition of the families affected and acknowledgement of the systemic patterns that allowed abuse to persist." Journalists scribbled notes. Cameras focused, the gallery murmuring approval. Maya's pulse remained steady, each word deliberate, carrying the weight of justice rather than vengeance. Blake's voice rose slightly defensive. "This is a personal attack. It undermines public confidence in law enforcement. Maya met his gaze directly. The morning sun slanted to the courthouse windows, casting long shadows across polished floors. Maya Jefferson sat with her legal team, folders stacked neatly beside her. The independent review into Officer Blake's conduct was underway, and today marked the first public session of testimony. She felt a mixture of anticipation, fatigue, and cautious optimism. This was progress, tangible and measured, yet the stakes were immense. Blake entered the room with his usual composure, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed unease. Authority had protected him in the past, but today, visibility and documentation limited his room to maneuver. Every witness, every statement, every document was now part of an undeniable record. The first witness took the stand, a family member from the memorial, describing in detail the intimidation and disrespect shown by Blake at the vigil. Her voice wavered at times, but the courage in her words filled the room. Maya felt her chest tighten. This was why she endured every microaggression, every bureaucratic delay, every public confrontation. "I watched him dismiss my grief," the woman said softly. "He didn't see my son as a person. He saw him as a number, a statistic, something to control." Maya reminded us that we mattered. And now, finally, we have a chance to be heard. The panel of reviewers listened intently, jotting notes, glancing at the files Maya had meticulously prepared. Her presence, quiet yet commanding, anchored the testimony. She observed Blake's reactions: tight jaw, flickering gaze, rigid posture. Authority could no longer operate unchecked when evidence and witnesses formed a collective shield. Next came video documentation from a memorial incident. The footage played on a large screen. Blake confronting Maya, his hand near her clipboard, the crowd watching, the journalists capturing every moment. Maya held her breath as the room absorbed the scene. Murmurs echoed softly, an acknowledgement of impropriety that couldn't be ignored. Blake attempted to interject. "Context is missing," she provoked. The lead reviewer held up a hand. "The footage speaks for itself. Your behavior is under scrutiny based on documented evidence, not assumption." Maya exhaled slowly, steadying her pulse. This was a procedural reckoning she had worked toward, every detailed preparation converging into a moment of accountability. The review continued through the morning, testimony from multiple families, colleagues, and journalists. Patterns emerged clearly: harassment, intimidation, dismissal complaints, repeated misuse of authority. The room's atmosphere shifted, a quiet recognition that systemic issues could no longer be obscured by rank or uniform. During a break, Maya stepped into the hallway. She glanced at the courthouse steps, recalling the memorial, the rain, and Blake's confrontational words. The memory fueled her determination. Janelle joined her, carrying coffee. "They're taking this seriously," Janelle said softly. "Yes," Maya replied. "But seriousness alone won't fix decades of negligence. This is about structural change, not just individual accountability." They returned inside as the afternoon session began. Blake's attorney attempted to challenge the evidence, disputing witness credibility and questioning procedural interpretations. Maya remained calm, her legal team countering with meticulous documentation. Every challenge was met with clarity, every deflection neutralized by thorough preparation. A particularly tense moment arrived when one council member questioned Blake directly. "How do you respond to repeated complaints of misconduct across multiple jurisdictions?" Blake shifted, lips pressed thin. "I have always performed my duties to the best of my ability. Any perception otherwise is a misunderstanding." Maya's pulse thrummed quietly, the tension palpable. "Perception?" she whispered to herself. "No, this is documented reality." She watched as the panel exchanged glances, a subtle acknowledgement that Blake's defenses were weakening under scrutiny. Authority, once absolute in private interactions, was being dismantled by transparency and collective testimony. By late afternoon, the session concluded. Maya gathered her files, her hands steady despite exhaustion. Families approached, offering gratitude and quiet smiles. Their presence was a tangible reminder that justice was not abstract. It was lived, experienced, and fought for collectively. Outside, The courthouse steps were bathed in golden light. Maya breathed deeply, feeling the weight of accountability settling into motion. Blake remained inside, his authority diminished, constrained by visibility and scrutiny. This was not revenge. This was justice, procedural and moral, anchored in evidence and collective voice. Janelle nudged her gently. It's a start. The investigation will move forward. Oversight, potential disciplinary action. This could change things. Maya nodded. It has to, not just for us, but for the families, the community, and the integrity of law enforcement itself. She reflected on the memorial steps, the rain, and the confrontation that had started this journey. Every moment of fear, anger, and humiliation had been transformed into strategy, evidence, and testimony. Every family, every witness, every document added to a growing force that could not be ignored. As they walked down the courthouse steps, Maya felt a subtle shift in the air, a recognition that persistence, preparation, and moral clarity could challenge even entrenched authority. This was only the beginning, but it was tangible progress. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lila Moreno. Coverage is going live. Public attention is on the investigation. This is the moment we've been building toward. Maya smiled faintly. It's not over, she said aloud, voice steady. But justice is in motion. By evening, the city was abuzz with coverage. Headlines highlighted patterns of misconduct, family testimonies, and the memorial that had catalyzed the exposure. Maya read each article. The city's Internal Affairs Office released its preliminary findings early in the morning. Maya Jefferson read the email, while sitting at her kitchen table, hands gripping her mug tightly. The report confirmed a pattern of misconduct by Officer Blake. Multiple complaints have been ignored, investigations delayed, and disciplinary actions insufficient. The evidence she and Lila had compiled had compelled official acknowledgement. Her phone buzzed incessantly, journalists, families, and legal advisors reaching out. Maya took a deep breath and began organizing responses. Public statements, interviews, and family notifications had to be handled carefully. The narrative had to remain focused on accountability, not personal vindication. Blake was placed on administrative leave, pending further review. For the first time, he faced consequences that could not be deflected by rank or routine. Maya noted the subtle shift in the city's institutions. Visibility, documentation, and public attention had created accountability. Authority was no longer absolute. At the memorial, families gathered to hear the news. Maya addressed them, her voice calm but resolute. The report confirms what we already knew: patterns of misconduct, negligence, and abuse of authority. Officer Blake will face disciplinary action, and reforms are being implemented to prevent this from happening again. A mother, tears in her eyes, whispered, "We finally have recognition." Finally. Maya nodded. The memorial steps, wet from the early morning drizzle, reflected sunlight in patterns she had designed to evoke memory and resilience. Each engraved name seemed to shine brighter, affirming the power of visibility and collective action. Blake arrived at the precinct later that day, summoned by Internal Affairs. Maya did not confront him personally, but she followed the news coverage closely. The reports were factual, detailing the findings without sensationalism. The public, previously unaware of his repeated misconduct, now knew the systemic failures that had protected him. Janelle, sitting beside Maya, observed, "He doesn't look like the same officer who confronted you at the memorial. There's uncertainty there." Maya allowed herself a faint smile. Authority feels different when accountability is real. That's the change we've been fighting for. Meanwhile, the City Council introduced measures to enhance transparency in law enforcement. Independent oversight committees were given more authority. Procedures for handling civilian complaints were streamlined, and public reporting mechanisms strengthened. Maya had anticipated resistance, but her persistence and the media coverage ensured that reforms could not be ignored. A journalist approached her at the memorial later in the day, asking, "Maya, how does it feel to see consequences finally being enforced?" She paused, considering her words carefully. It's not about satisfaction. It's about justice. It's about families who have been silenced for years finally being heard. The consequences are meaningful only if they prevent further harm, restore accountability, and ensure the system serves the community as intended. Her gaze shifted to reflective panels, names shimmering in the late afternoon light. She remembered the confrontation, the fear, and the public scrutiny. Each step of resistance, documentation, and advocacy had led to this moment. The memorial was not only a tribute to victims, but a catalyst for systemic change. Blake, meanwhile, faced increasing scrutiny from his peers. Internal emails leaked, showing dismissals of previous complaints, and social media amplified public awareness. His career was at risk, and his public persona crumbled under the weight of transparency. For the first time, he could not rely on rank alone to shield him from accountability. Maya received a call from one of the families, a father whose son had been memorialized last year. "Maya, I don't know how to thank you. For the first time, I feel like our voices matter." She replied softly, "You've always mattered. We just had to make sure the system heard you." Later, she visited the memorial alone. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of traffic. She traced her fingers over the engraved names, recalling the stories she had heard, the grief she had witnessed, and the courage of those who had stood with her. Each name was a testament to memory, resilience, and accountability. Each design element was a statement that lives erased by injustice could be reclaimed through remembrance, advocacy, and collective witness. Janelle joined her, carrying a small bouquet left by a family. "They wanted you to have this," she said softly. Maya accepted it, placing the flowers at the base of the central fountain. She inhaled the scent, letting the moment anchor her. The memorial was more than stone and water. It was a living record of justice pursued, of courage upheld, and of the power of persistence. As the evening descended, Maya reflected on the journey. The confrontation at the memorial had sparked exposure. Meticulous documentation and witness testimony had revealed patterns of misconduct. Public attention had amplified accountability, and institutional procedures, once barriers, had become instruments of justice. Every element played its part in systemic change. Her phone buzzed again, another journalist requesting an interview. Maya considered the words she would choose: measured, factual, morally grounded. The narrative had to remain focused on victims and reform, not personal triumph. Every public statement was a step in sustaining accountability beyond today. Blake's administrative leave would continue pending further investigation, but Maya understood the broader significance. Consequences extended beyond one officer. They signaled a cultural shift, however gradual, in the enforcement of justice and respect for civilian rights. The city lights reflected on TH. The first light of morning filtered through Maya Jefferson's apartment window, painting the room with soft gold. She sat at her desk, coffee steaming beside her, and reviewed the final reports from the Internal Affairs investigation. Officer Blake had faced formal disciplinary actions, suspension, retraining mandates, and an official reprimand added to his permanent record. The culmination of months of meticulous documentation, advocacy, and witness testimony had resulted in tangible accountability. Yet Maya felt no euphoria. The work had exacted a personal toll: sleepless nights, public scrutiny, and the constant tension of confronting systemic injustice. Victory was tempered by exhaustion and the knowledge that institutional change was ongoing, fragile, and often slow. Janelle entered, holding a stack of letters from families who had visited the memorial. "Messages of thanks," she said softly. "They want you to read them." Maya set aside the reports and began reading. Each note carried gratitude, reflection, and hope. "Thank you for giving our loved ones a voice. Because of your courage, the city sees us. We will not forget, and we will continue to fight for accountability." A subtle warmth spread through her chest. This was the essence of her work. Not the headlines, not the reprimand of Blake, not the procedural victories, but the affirmation that lives lost were remembered, that voices silenced were heard, and that resilience had taken root. She returned to the memorial later that morning, walking the rain-slick steps with quiet reverence. Families had begun to leave flowers, candles, and photographs. Some spoke softly to one another, recounting memories, laughing through tears, and drawing strength from shared remembrance. Maya observed from a distance, a gentle pride and solemn responsibility intertwining within her. One child, no older than 8, approached the central fountain, fingers tracing a name engraved on a reflective panel. "Mommy, is this him?" she asked. "Yes," the mother whispered, kneeling beside her. This is how we remember. Maya watched, aware that her efforts had made a subtle but profound difference. These small acts of reflection, memory, and communal acknowledgement were the true markers of justice, intangible yet enduring. She lingered by the reflective panels, watching sunlight ripple across the engraved names. Each shimmer was a testament. Lives acknowledged, stories preserved, and authority held accountable. Her mind wandered back to the confrontation at the memorial, to Blake's arrogance, to the initial humiliation and the quiet resilience it had ignited. Justice, she realized, was never instantaneous. It was built meticulously through documentation, advocacy, persistence, and moral courage. Blake's reprimand, the independent review, and the institutional reforms were only a part of a larger process. The real victory lay in cultural and systemic awareness, in making visible the patterns that had been hidden for too long. A father approached her, his voice soft. "Maya, I want to thank you, not just for standing up to him, but for showing us how to stand together, to be heard, and to persist." Maya nodded, a quiet smile touching her lips. "You've always had the strength. I just helped make it visible." The memorial was alive with reflection. Families, children, and visitors moved deliberately through the space. Each engraved name, every reflective panel, and the central fountain symbolized memory, continuity, and moral vigilance. Maya recognized that her personal fight had become a shared one that extended beyond her immediate experience to a broader community of voices demanding recognition and justice. She considered the future. Structural reforms, oversight committees, and media attention were only starting points. Real change required vigilance, sustained advocacy, and the willingness to confront authority when it overstepped. Maya's role would continue, not as a singular hero, but as a participant in an ongoing movement toward systemic accountability. Janelle stood nearby, watching her. "Do you ever rest?" she asked gently. Maya chuckled softly, a low, reflective sound. Rest is relative, but reflection is necessary. And this reminds me why it matters. They walked together to the edge of the memorial, observing a small gathering of families placing flowers and tracing names. Each gesture reinforced the importance of persistence, the power of visibility, and the moral obligation to confront injustice. Her phone buzzed again. Another journalist requesting commentary, another family seeking advice, another community organizer wanting guidance. Maya accepted each responsibility with measured focus, recognizing the balance between personal limits and public advocacy. As she stood alone for a moment, observing the sunlight glinting across the reflective panels, she allowed herself to acknowledge the profound transformation of the past months. Confrontation had evolved into documentation, documentation into public exposure, exposure into institutional accountability, and accountability into cultural awareness. Each step, deliberate and deliberate again, had created momentum toward justice. She thought of Officer Blake, now constrained by oversight, his previous arrogance tempered by public and institutional scrutiny. He had been confronted not only by her but by families, journalists, evidence, and the undeniable moral weight of his repeated misconduct. The personal victory was small, almost incidental. The systemic impact was enduring. Maya walked the fountain, setting down a small bouquet of white lilies. She watched the water ripple, catching sunlight and reflecting engraved names. In this quiet act, she felt the culmination of courage, persistence, and resilience. Not triumph, not vengeance, but moral and social integrity in action. Families continued to visit the memorial throughout the day. Some left flowers, some spoke softly to each other. Others traced names, whispering memories. Maya observed, quietly ensuring the space remained protected, respected, and focused on the purpose for which it was created. As dusk approached, she paused at the central fountain, closing her eyes. The weight of the fight, the systemic injustice, the confrontation with Blake, and the months of relentless advocacy pressed gently on her consciousness. Yet, the satisfaction was unmistakable. Accountability had begun, families had been heard, and the memorial stood as a living testament to memory, resilience, and justice. Janelle joined her once more. "Tomorrow we continue," she said softly. Maya nodded. "Yes, tomorrow and the day after that." Advocacy never ends. But reflection grounds us, reminds us why we fight, and prepares us for what comes next. The sun set over the memorial, casting long shadows and golden light across the engraved names. Each shimmer, each reflection, and each whispered memory symbolize the enduring power of truth, the resilience of communities, and the responsibility of those willing to confront systemic injustice. Maya Jefferson walked away slowly, shoulders squared, eyes steady. Her fight was ongoing, her vigilance necessary, but the memorial to families and the progress made reminded her that persistence, courage, and moral clarity could indeed effect real, lasting change. And in that quiet moment, Maya allowed herself a deep breath, knowing that resilience was not only the capacity to endure, but the courage to act, to remember, and to transform injustice into lasting accountability.